Good evening and welcome very, very much to Conversations, where I'm pleased to welcome to the program this evening Jack Horner. And Jack Horner is associate editor?
Associate publisher.
Associate publisher with Random House, and he has particular responsibility for the Random House word menu, this unique book that is out now just here in this season of 1992-93. And Jack Horner, welcome very, very much to Conversations.
It's a great pleasure and a privilege for me to be here with you, Harold.
I wonder if you might. Now, we both had an acquaintanceship with Stephen. We want to talk about the author, the person who put this book together. But you, as associate publisher, maybe you could talk a little bit about the Random House word menu. What is it? Because it's a major new reference source, and it's going to take a little introduction. But maybe you could share what it is, the Random House word menu.
Well, I think that you have used a word. It's a revolutionary new reference book that organizes language, the way we use it, the way we think, the way we associate words today, and probably will for the next 50, 100 years.
We have it right here, and it seems to me it might be as good a time as any here is to put it right out for the camera to see the way it looks. It's the Random House word menu, and maybe they could come in with camera one, give them a second to come in on that. The term word menu is a very appropriate one because it is indeed almost like a menu of words that is offered, and
this
maybe
is
you
true.
could spell out a little bit in detail.
Well, it is a menu, and right away it awakens thoughts of a computer menu with organization by hierarchies and things like that.
Yeah.
But also, and I suppose at dinner time we think a restaurant menu, a fantastic restaurant menu with many, many sections and many tempting choices, ranging from the appetizer all the way down to that dessert that you look for first, that chocolate mousse cake.
Right.
And they're wonderful, wonderful discoveries. It's a gold mine.
Yeah, and what we've done is, maybe we could just say, is Steve Glazier, who was the young man who put together, has in a certain sense put a grid upon the English language, and the words, rather than being, if I may, rather than being alphabetically arranged, are arranged according to categories and in classifications, more or less the way we arrange the language in our own mind. We don't arrange it alphabetically.
That's right.
We do it by categories and subject areas. And maybe you could lay it out. There's 8 major ways.
There are 8.
This grid that he's put on the language and the reality in a certain sense.
Well, I think there's 7 major sections.
Right.
Beginning, it begins with it's very concrete, so that you can grasp it immediately. There's nothing abstract about it when you start out, so that it starts with nature.
Right.
And the very first section under nature is anatomy.
All right.
And the very first entry under anatomy is Adam's apple.
All right.
So that it's something you can grasp immediately. And then you proceed from there to science and technology, and then domestic life, then institutions, and then arts and leisure, and then language, and then the human condition.
So these are 7 categories, 7 main categories.
7 main categories, and under there you will have groups of 25 chapters, and each one of the categories would have maybe 3 or at the most 4 chapters.
I see, yeah.
And then you would have...
so it's a hierarchy.
It is
There's a hierarchy.
There is a hierarchy.
Of the words, the way they're arranged in a logical sequence.
In a very, very logical sequence. And my experience with the Random House word menu, as I got familiar with it and began to use it, was very much like getting to know a person. That there was a logic to the whole thing. There was nothing artificial. There is nothing artificial about the Random House word menu. It has a personality. It even has a sense of humor.
Yes, it does indeed. There's a great deal of sense of humor.
That's right. That's right. So it reflects the author.
Yeah.
And it's remarkable in that way that something that I think that very often we think of things like dictionaries or thesauruses as being dry. Well, there's nothing dry about this at all.
There's nothing.
You get into even some of the sections, for instance, insults.
Yeah.
Stephen was wonderfully resourceful when it came to his insults.
Uh-huh.
He broke them up into Are you going to insult the person's aptitude, or are you going to insult the person's character?
Well, he was a writer, and he understood the need to develop character.
That's right.
Yes, right.
And back during the presidential campaign, I was looking at some of the insults that were being used, and I noticed that they were concentrating on aptitude. Their term like bozo or bird brain,
right,
or bimbo. Remember the bimbo eruptions?
Sure, of course.
And these terms all appear right there in one particular category, one type of insult.
Yeah.
But he also has other things that are less appealing, but they're still insults.
Yeah.
Insults of gender, for instance.
Yeah.
You know, when you're insulting a person's gender or their intelligence or even their race.
Yes.
These things are all there, so that it covers the whole spectrum of human endeavor, of our society, of our what we are as people. That would be the things that are good about us that we would like people to know, but also the dark side.
Yeah, there is a section of the book called The Dark Side, isn't there? Yeah.
That's true. That's under the human condition.
Yes, right.
And so that you would have crime and perversions and things like that with drugs and alcohol abuse.
That's right.
And
He's brought
so
it right
forth.
up. He's brought it right up to date with the terminology of the drug culture and
That's
things
right.
that you might not find in the dictionary, even in a new dictionary you might not well find. But he brought it right up to date, as it were, and very eclectic in what he was trying to be. That a writer from many disciplines, and some creative writers, some technical writers, and others would want to have well at hand.
Well, this is true, and you mentioned writers, certainly students, who in this way would have the same need, because right now many students are going back to the next semester at, say, college.
Yeah.
Well, they're taking new subjects with new glossaries of terms.
Yes.
Well, what better way to become familiar with the new subject before you actually start studying it than to come into the Random House word menu and look up the various terms that are going to be used and be familiar with them.
Yeah, and there's so many things we could talk about. You said earlier people you've been in communication with you who are foreign language. They're learning English as a second language.
Correct.
And to be able to get words that are done other than alphabetically, but by subject area, all navigational terms, or all terms, as you said, anatomy and so, tools,
Just
or
something so
musical
so
instruments,
musical
of a class by themselves.
Yes.
Would make that very interesting for somebody trying to understand the language, or for perusal value as well.
Oh, it's a browser's delight.
Yeah.
Just the other day, I was talking with a friend who was an authority on rock music.
Yeah.
And I knew that rock started back in the 50s, but during the 60s, I was living in Germany, so I was away from the culture. Then I came back in the 70s and in the 80s, and I wanted to know what the dances were that were popular during the various decades.
Rock
and I was
started
able
in the 50s, huh?
It was back in the 50s with Birdland.
Birdland, yeah.
And then you have the twist and the Holly Gully, and then disco, and now you have slam dancing and salsa with a Cuban and also Puerto Rican influence, and also voguing.
Yeah, voguing now, right?
That's right.
That's up to date for somebody who doesn't know what the terms are.
Right up to date
and he
with
has
Madonna.
Madonna is very popular now.
That's
yeah.
right.
And they have the dancing, so he has that, and then
I just was looking that for information.
Yeah.
And then I found the answer to my question, and I looked over on the other side of the page, and I saw drums.
Right.
And I then, as you say...
There's a logic there.
That's right.
Yeah.
I've just started looking at all the various kinds of drums, banana drums, and everything else under the sun that was there.
Well, you know, we want to talk about this unique personality, and we want to because it was a very large measure, this book, just as the Roget's Thesaurus, which in 1852, I think.
That's right.
And this may be the major step forward from the time that Roget put his grid, as it were, upon the English language with his Thesaurus. We want to talk about Steve in some detail, but I wonder, you have the dimensions of exactly how many chapters and so forth there are in the word menu yourself?
Yes.
I wonder, maybe you could go through that. There's 8 major divisions, and
Well,
how does it all break down?
chapters.
How does this whole hierarchy thing break down now?
All right. Well, one of the beauties of the book is that right in the beginning of the book,
Yes.
you will have an abbreviated table of contents, which will show you exactly what these are. You start off with nature, science and technology, domestic life, institutions, arts and leisure, language, and the human condition.
Now that's the way Stephen Glazier, who was the genius behind this book,
Yes.
that was the grid that he put on the language.
That's right.
And he had studied, if I'm not mistaken, Dewey Decimal,
Yes.
the Library of Congress system, which is another grid for putting on the language.
That's right. And
He'd even gone back to study the Trividium and the system of organization of medieval university discipline and curriculum, I think. Had he not?
I think you're right. And
of course, Roget.
And then he was fascinated with Roget's
He was.
thesaurus.
He was a student
and I
of
suppose
Roget.
that as a child, he collected words and glossaries.
That's right.
The way other young people would collect stamps and coins and even match covers.
Yes.
And this was just a huge collection of miscellaneous glossaries until he was writing I think it was a novel called The Lost Provinces.
He wrote The Lost Provinces, of course.
And
for Avon.
he found how useful these glossaries would be in having precisely the right word to correspond to the time of the novel.
Yeah, well, it was Apollinaire, and it was Picasso, and some of that, in that magic year, 1905,
Yes.
in Europe, and so he was
Yes.
trying to get the feel for that, and the costumes, and the time, and all of the things you would need to write the book, and he kept a list of these things in order to
Precisely.
use it to write the novel, right.
And then as I recall from speaking with Stephen about this, he said that it was when he was out in Hollywood
Yes.
and doing screen writing and things like that, that a colleague of his said, you know, I think you've got a gold mine here with all your glossaries. What you ought to do is really organize the whole language and then put it in book form.
Yes.
And you would have something that every writer, every crossword puzzle addict, every student would want to have.
Yeah.
And so that I think at that time, then he started with the dictionary and all the words in the dictionary, and then putting them on cards and putting them in piles out on the living room
Yeah,
floor.
3x5 cards, all the words in the
That's
college
right.
dictionary, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then organizing them by categories.
Yeah.
And you'd find that some words that would be spelled like, say, M-O-L-E would turn up with maybe as many as 8 different meanings.
Yes, that's right.
Very
Yeah,
distinct meanings.
Yeah, like a spy.
A spy,
A double
exactly.
spy, right.
That's right.
It's a dessert.
That's right.
Yeah,
Malay.
right. Yeah, right.
And then it's a construction equipment that digs tunnels.
Right.
And then it's an animal,
Uh-huh.
the mole.
Yeah.
And then it's a mole on your face.
That's right. That's right.
So
yeah.
that there
Yeah.
are any number of things.
Well, it's also very important. We were speaking a little bit off camera before that all of the terms of the human condition are moving exponential. Population, information is coming so rapidly now. The silicon processes of information are coming. Everything is coming almost exponentially so rapidly now that people often feel overwhelmed. And with the information itself, the amount of information that's coming. And out of cybernetic language, there's a term, cybernetic engineers will say that they get a condition of information overload
Yes.
within a system or systems analysis. But an information overload permits pattern recognition
Yes.
at a level. So the idea behind systems thinking is to have pattern recognizing capability, and that's exactly what Stephen has done with the book, isn't it? He's put
this is
a pattern
exactly-
recognizing capability on the language, and that's the way people think increasingly now.
Well, I think that it's the
whole gestalts, yeah.
that's right, soundbite
Yeah.
in all of our communication, rather than speaking in long paragraphs. We're speaking in sound bites, and
Well,
sound bites were 30 seconds, and then in the last election campaign, I think they were getting down to between 6 and 10 seconds.
Yeah.
I
that's
think that there is,
unfortunate, yeah.
we say pattern recognition. there's an old-fashioned term, which is stereotyping, too, which is that you recognize certain stereotypes for words, for behavior, for all kinds of things. And I think that Stephen had a particular talent for not only recognizing these things, but then for being able to recreate it in book form so that other people could benefit from his organizational capabilities.
I had some occasion to know him and some of his family and so forth, and he was a gifted. We're talking, unfortunately, in the past tense, because here recently, just in this last year, just as he completed this master work,
yes,
he unfortunately developed a brain tumor and passed on, which was a great and tragic event.
It's
was the case, and it's he who should be here talking of the book in a very real sense, instead of you're having to do so for him.
Well,
you're doing well, but it would have been better that he could have explained it.
Oh, this is absolutely true, and I think that it's when I am in a discussion like this with you that I feel that Stephen is there with me with a twinkle in his eye that he had when he brought in the manuscript, which was about 2.5 feet high, and delivered it on my desk. And we got a picture of that when he came in with that, and it was wonderful.
Having worked decades, I think, literally decades.
Well, it was about together. 10 years, and of course, going back to the original inspiration, it would have to have been like 3 decades because this was an obsession and it was a life's work. And what a splendid legacy. A young man, 42, 43 years old, who's no longer with us, and then other people who live to be 80, 90, 100 years old, and they have nothing like this to leave behind.
A major classification system of the English language as it emerges as a world language, as we move into an information environment, the first major classification system of the language since Roger.
That's right, since 1852.
Is a feat of no small measure that all intellectually curious and interested people would be wanting to be interested in, and it also has great practical significance. I wonder, we do want to go into detail about Stephen himself, because it was his genius that was behind this. But again, could you go through it with us now? We've got 9 major categories, and I think you can just tick them off. How many of the different kinds of, you've got chapters.
Well, for instance, under nature, you'd have the human body.
Right.
Then you'd have living things.
So you got all of taxonomy.
That's right.
You got all taxonomy divided into the biological and the vegetative, or I mean the zoological and the...
That's right. And then you'd have the earth.
The geography, geology, landforms, tectonics,
That's right. But then you move into the next major section, which would be science and technology.
Science and technology is a gigantic section.
Well, it is, but you'd have all the various sciences.
So then they would break science down into optics, to physics, and then physics down into optics, and to the various branches of physics, with all the terminology of all the fields of that in a categorized way. Right,
That's right. And then you have technology.
Technology, applied
tools,
science,
and all that kind of thing.
All of the tools.
And then transportation.
So there you would have
automobiles and all the carriages and the airplanes and everything else.
Right.
And then you
navigational.
Yes.
All the ships and boats and so forth would be categorized under one section.
That's right.
So that if you wanted to find the name of a certain kind of sailing ship, you would look under
a bark or
technology,
a galleon or
transportation, boats, and you're very likely to find that listed there.
That's right.
At a level at which you could find the actual name of that particular three-rigger or whatever kind of a ship you were thinking of and had in your mind. It's a reverse dictionary.
Indeed it is.
It allows you to go in a reverse way to find the word you want. It's a word menu. Right?
Well, just as a very practical thing, it has to be several months ago, I was leaving a message at home for a person who was coming to repair a window. And you know these stick things that divide the window panes?
Yes, I think I do. Yeah.
And you know what they are, but you don't know what they're called. And I didn't know what they were called. I had actually 2 reasons for wanting to be precise about this. One was that I like to be precise.
Well, you're
But
yeah,
the second
yes.
reason was I thought that if I knew what it was called,
Yeah.
I'd probably get a little bit better, a more reasonable bill than as if I seemed to be a babe in Toyland. And
from
so
the carpenter or
that's
from the
right,
woodworker.
exactly.
Yeah, right.
And so that I was able to use the Random House word menu, and I was.
You really did, right?
That's
Pulled
right.
it off the shelf,
That's
yeah.
right. And just went into the into domestic life and found.
Which is another major division, right?
That's
Domestic
right.
life,
That's right. And found the home.
Right.
And then rooms, and then decorative elements, and walls and windows.
Window.
And right there, found and was able to run down and found mullion. Now that was a word I never in my life knew.
Never heard of it. It sounds like a stew. Yes.
But that's right.
Yeah.
Mullion stew.
Yeah.
Maybe that'd be a very good stew.
Yeah,
wouldn't
but
it?
yeah, but you found it, right, and left
That's
it in
right.
the note for the
That's right.
woodworker, right?
That's right.
Yeah, right.
And he knew right away what that was part of his vocabulary.
Right, right.
So that I think that very often we think that if we don't know the word, nobody else in the world knows it either. The fact is that you
There's
get
many specialized vocabularies
That's
that
right.
people have, yeah.
well different kinds
Sure.
of wrenches, for instance.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, you have all the different tools and everything in the technology section here in the Random House word menu.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And
or much less the new emerging fields. Television has a great deal of language all to itself. The
Indeed.
computer, he has a wide variety of the computer terminology
true.
that is involved, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's maybe on a different...
But that would be in the science and technology.
That would be in
and
the
then
science and
also,
technology.
Also that you would
because
get it under...
You jump to the home there, right?
Yes, but you would get into arts and leisure, into the performing arts.
Wait a
where
minute, arts
applied-
and leisure now is another chapter then?
That's
or another
another-
major part,
Another
right?
major part. That's actually the fifth part. The biggest...
So that's divided down into painting and sculpture, theater,
fine arts and
fine
literature,
arts,
the performing arts.
music, which
That's
is
right.
one of your
Applied arts,
one
music,
of your loves, right?
exactly.
You're a tenor, right?
I'm
or no,
a
you're
baritone.
baritone. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
All right, right. Yes, right. Right.
And then you have leisure and recreation. But you'll have the largest section of all, which until you begin to think of it, you wonder what the largest section would be. And it's institutions. Because under institutions, you would have social order, the economy.
Wow, he puts that under institutions.
That's right,
interesting.
because you're studying economy and finance and all of these things.
Yeah.
And
So
then,
all of the
and then
terminology,
the social sciences.
all the terminology of economics is the supply side.
Exactly.
What in the world is that? What is Laffer curve? What is
That's
this
right.
and that? And these things are all in there logically where they're supposed to be.
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
quite a feat, being able to put all that stuff together, isn't it? Quite a
Oh,
mind to be
it
able to
is-
organize that.
It is wonderful, and it's a thing that I've heard people say, well, this is certainly not a book that you would just take with you on a trip to read on the airplane or anything like that. And I had to say to them,
You
that's
might,
exactly where I read it the
Sure,
first time.
absolutely.
I was on a trip from here to Los Angeles.
Yes.
And I took a bound galley, which was just a soft cover printout
Yeah.
of the book.
Uh-huh.
And I was reading the thing. I couldn't
Put it down.
couldn't put it down.
Yeah.
I was going from subject to subject.
Yeah.
And this is what made it
Surfing,
so fascinating,
Yeah.
was that I was learning about subjects,
Yes.
not just words.
Terminology of the
but
subject. Yeah,
terminology of
right,
a
sure.
whole subject, so
Right.
that I could get into a subject like, say, religion,
Yeah.
and all of the terminology that would have to do with Islam,
Right.
or Buddhism, or Christianity, or Judaism,
Yeah,
or whatever,
right.
and the holidays and so forth. Look,
Right.
it
You're
was
getting educated very quickly in terms of the terminology of these words.
not
And-
only quickly,
Yeah.
but painlessly.
Yes, right. Or enjoyably, right.
That's right.
And
I mean-
seeing the relationships between these things, right?
Yes.
And he also wrote, if I may say so, in a very, what he called telegraphic style. I mean, it was very,
Oh, yeah.
it was very quick and very, very carefully researched so that for accuracy of what was being said, but also very, very carefully, almost poetically, with poetic, efficiency of language,
Yes.
it conveying the idea.
Well, this is where he has a talent, God-given talent of a lexicographer.
Yeah.
And that is to be able to define a word in very, very few words.
Yes, right.
Very efficiently. And he was able to do this, and not only in writing, but I would be in a meeting with Stephen, and a word would come up, and he would just be able to pour out a definition, I was just wide-eyed with
Yeah.
admiration for this.
Yeah, yeah, he had that capability. He was gifted in lots of ways. That was one of the. And then if we could just go through. You had the institutions as a major one that includes
That
all
is
of
the
your,
largest section.
Yeah,
of
it
all.
would be. I can see. Is that the part that includes, like, you have things like the countries and different kinds
Yes,
of things, and
that's right. Social
corporate
order.
structure, the language of corporate structure,
Yeah,
leverage buyout,
that's right.
all of
That's
these
right.
kind of terms.
All
Okay.
those terms.
And then what are the other? What is the other?
And then you have
major
after that, well, of course, arts and leisure, which we've already mentioned.
Right.
And then you have language.
Language.
And that
right.
probably is one of my favorite sections. And
Yeah.
I think that that's probably where, if you want to go back to the real root of the word menu, of the Random House word menu,
Yes.
Stephen Glazier's inspiration would have to be in the language section.
Yes.
And then everything else grew from that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's where you see not only the precision of communication, but also, the humor,
Yeah.
and also the practicality of the book.
Yeah.
That, for instance, verbs of motion.
Right.
And I was, a few weeks ago, and this is right after Thanksgiving, which is the busiest shopping day before Christmas, I
Yes.
guess.
Right.
And I was being interviewed on the 6 p.m. news for the largest TV station in Manchester, New Hampshire. And we were out
Yeah.
in the Mall of New Hampshire.
Yes.
And believe me, it was like an anthill. It
Yeah, I'll
was
bet.
teeming
I'll
with
bet.
people.
Yeah. Right.
And I just happened to open the book, and I don't know why it opened up to verbs of motion.
Right.
And I looked at that,
Mhm.
and I had to laugh
Yeah.
because there it was under Gates.
Yeah.
And I looked around it, and I saw,
Gates, different kinds of
that's
movement.
right, different kinds of
Yeah,
movement.
yeah.
And I saw some people were ambling,
Right.
some people were barreling.
Right. Right.
And then I would look down there, aha, and there's a woman hot-footing it
Yes, right,
to the
right.
nearest sale.
Right,
She
right.
knew exactly what she
Right,
wanted,
right.
and she was going in there to
And
get
all
what
of
she
these termed
and
gates
all
are under
these
one
terms-
section of.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
right.
And you can imagine that for,
yeah.
say, a writer, but even for a person in conversation,
Yeah.
instead of just saying going,
Yeah.
to be able to draw on a resource that would be so rich as this that you would be able to find the precise word
Yeah.
that you would need that would express exactly what you mean.
Yeah, I think Stephen one time said if you can find the exact, as a creative writer would know, if you can find the exact word at the
Yes.
right time, it opens up a whole creative realm for a creative writer very often.
That's right.
Trying to find that word, right?
And the discovery
Yes.
is so exciting,
Right.
and I think that that his delight
Mm-hmm.
is something that he was able to transmit in this book,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a delightful experience for me to be able to find these words in the Random House word menu,
Yeah.
and to be able to relive the experience that he intended me to
Yeah.
experience.
Right. Is there one last major section?
Yes, there is. The
Yeah.
one last section, and this was a section that caused all kinds of, call it discussion, but also some, a bit of agonizing. The human condition,
Yeah.
and what should go under that, and character, cognition,
Right.
the dark side.
Yeah.
That was something that was very, very difficult
Yeah.
to know.
He brought it in.
Well,
and then
he knew that the
he
dark
had to
side
bring
would
this
be
in.
there.
Yeah. Right.
But then what would you put there?
Yeah. Right.
For instance, would you put drinking and alcoholic beverages in the dark side
Some
because of
people
substance
would.
abuse?
Temperance unions people would. you know,
That's
but
right.
Others might
But
not.
frankly, that's where he put it initially.
Yeah. Initially, he might have.
And then we discussed it, and with the lexicographers at Random House, and he thought, no, I don't think it goes there under abuse.
Uh-huh.
That really the drinks, for instance, everything
Well,
from a
yeah.
daiquiri to a zombie,
Yeah.
that would go back in leisure and recreation, wouldn't it?
Less the very fine wine.
And the fine wines and things
Yeah.
like that, exactly, and the
Yeah.
types of glasses
Yeah.
that you would have for different kinds of drinks and so
Yeah,
forth. Well,
yeah.
a balloon glass and so
Yeah.
all of that is in here.
Yeah.
And then you can, but abuse, substance abuse,
Yeah.
that comes in the dark side.
That's where he brought in drug terminology?
Drug
Street
terminology.
drug
That's right.
terminology.
For instance,
That could be useful if you're
the
writing
many,
a novel,
many
yeah.
different terms for marijuana, for instance.
There must be millions, yeah.
And
Or hundreds.
yeah, and so that
And Nixon
Nixon, that's
What is
right.
it?
A
Nixon
poor,
was-
poor quality drug, right?
was a poor quality drug passing off as a high quality drug?
That's
or
right,
something?
that's
yeah.
right, that's
So
right.
he's used terminology from the dark side then.
That's right.
It could be very
that's
useful to a writer of a contemporary novel or something.
Oh,
of that sort.
absolutely. Or even for a person who is, say, going to be watching a television program on the subject, that you want to become somewhat familiar with some of the jargon
Right.
ahead of time.
Oh, it's part of the world, unfortunately.
That's right.
isn't
I mean,
it?
this is a...
But then he goes into the more important questions of truth and ends up with questions
Faith.
of faith and
and the very
spirituality.
last
and
entry is wisdom.
Wisdom.
And
is
I
the
think
last
it's
word in
appropriate,
the-
here we are in
Yeah.
January, the beginning of the year, thinking of New Year's resolutions, not revolutions,
Yeah.
but resolutions,
Yeah.
and perhaps we should be striving for wisdom, and that maybe Stephen Glazier is helping us along the way.
Wisdom is the last word in the in the word menu. Right?
That's right, that's right.
Yeah.
So that
And
it
there
proceeds
is-
from something, it proceeds from something so concrete at the very beginning as Adam's apple.
Yes. That's the first?
That's the
huh?
very first entry,
All right.
and the very last one is wisdom.
And I wonder, maybe we could find out what at the very last, because faith, I see chapter 25th, faith, religion. He gets into under the human condition. So for wisdom, you're sure enough, wisdom is an important word.
Indeed.
Wisdom is an important word, and he has wisdom, understanding of spiritual truth, enlightenment, capacity to discern the essence of the ways of human beings and the universe.
Isn't that
Beautiful
beautifully
way
put?
to end the book. Right?
That is
I mean,
beautifully put.
The
That's a
last
real,
word in the book, and that is under faith and under the subcategory truth, wisdom, and spiritual attainment.
That's
so,
right.
So he had covered the.
Well, he covered everything in
waterfront.
that section.
Yeah.
For instance, under faith, you have religion and the world's religions.
Right.
And Christianity, Judaism, Eastern religions, and so on and so forth. And then you get into mythology and folklore.
Yes.
And, of course, that's a fascinating section right there. And then you move even farther afield to magic
Yes.
and the occult, and then eschatology,
Yeah.
fate, heaven and paradise,
Right.
and hell. And then you end up with a fulfillment, I think, truth, wisdom, and spiritual attainment.
Yeah, that's
That sort of
right.
ties the whole
It
thing
does.
together.
It does tie the whole thing together in a way that does harken back to, in a certain sense, Roget, trying to get a very large, very abstract kind of reading of reality, and yet does bring in the classification of Dewey Decimal and the Library of Congress, and
Yes.
trying to put a grid and a pattern recognizing capability on the language, which really does fit into the boomers as they come up, the
That's right.
younger generation coming up, and
Well,
those that will
this
be
is right.
following upon them. And he was a boomer himself.
He was, and I think
was
that
born in-
I mean, I think that some of us would say intent on instant gratification. That may be too harsh a term, but I think that people want immediate answers to questions,
Yeah.
and so that they want.
Well,
to
things are moving so quickly.
That's right. They
Yeah.
want to start with something concrete,
Yeah.
and then after you've gotten something concrete to hang on to as
Yeah.
an anchor,
Uh-huh.
then you can move to the more abstract.
Yeah.
And that's what's very, very different from, say, Roget,
Yeah.
where he begins with the abstract.
Well, yeah, he says existence and then non-existence.
That's
you
right,
know,
that's
you know.
right.
So, I mean,
And you have-
existence includes everything in a certain
right.
sense, but then he goes on to summarize it down. But he was, again, attempting to do something with the language to put an epistemological or an ontological grid on the language,
Oh,
which
indeed.
is
And it was
which was monumental.
Oh,
It was
ab-
1852.
1852,
And
but
there's not been
again-
a major work, there's not been a major attempt comprehensively to do that until now with Stephen's work and
Well, this is true.
with the people at Random House.
Well, this is
it
true.
seems to me.
No, you're
I
absolutely
mean,
correct.
there are glossaries and there are specialized dictionaries which can get very huge.
That's
but
right.
to put a generalized grid on the language
That's right.
and on the reality in a certain sense is a really very, very new idea.
Well, I think that, like Roget, it could only be done by a person for whom it was their obsession, that it was their life's work. Roget was not a lexicographer either.
Yeah,
And it was his philosophy
he was a
of life.
collector of words.
He was a collector of words
Yeah.
and
A philosopher.
and organizing this
Yes.
to reflect the society that he, as he recognized it, as he knew it and understood it, was his life's work. And
Yeah.
he did it for most of the first half of the last century.
Yeah.
And I think that what we see here is, with Stephen Glazier, the very same thing.
Yeah.
That, as a teenager, collecting glossaries of words,
Yeah.
and then as he grew and matured, this became more and more sophisticated, and or maybe there were so many words and so many glossaries and so many sections and subsections
Yeah.
that he didn't know where to put it all,
Yeah.
and somebody said, look, I think you've got a gold mine if you'll put it all together in
Yeah.
a book.
Yeah, and he also, I have some knowledge of his family and so forth. He had a good background in a certain sense. His father, William Glazier, who many people might recognize, had studied at Harvard with a number of the people there, with Paul Sweezy and others, and had worked had helped put a number of definitive articles in Scientific American, seminal
Yes.
articles, had studied science. He had worked with Henry Bridges in the Longshoreman contract to get past that problem of containerization, had many social problems that he was concerned with, had gone and was the good right arm to Jonas Salk in putting the Jonas Salk Institute together, which brought his father, Steve's father, in touch with many of the scientific leadership of the last decades. And then he was dean at Einstein College before.
Yes.
He also died unfortunately at a young age. And then he had the fortune of having for his mother a very highly talented figurative painter and sculptor who was
Yes.
very sensitive to the artistic world.
Well, I think
And
that
between
here
the
you
two
have,
of them, they
there's a
ingrained in
merging
Stephen,
of this.
Yeah, they
Just as this book is a merging of dictionary, thesaurus, collection of glossaries, almanac, Stephen himself was a merging of the practical in the terms of his father,
And the scientific.
and the scientific,
Yeah.
but with the artistic, the sensitive.
That's what I was trying to say.
With his mother.
Yeah, and also with his wife, Anna,
That's
the
right,
talented
Raviv, right.
actress and lovely actress who also opened up theater. He took a degree in screenwriting.
Yes.
He was Exeter, Harvard, decided to go to Berkeley and took a degree in screenwriting. And he was wrapped up in that excitement of the 1960s and so
Yes.
forth, as was so much of that generation. But he was always gifted from the time that he was a very young child.
Yes.
And he was always a reader of almanacs and a collector of words, so
Yes.
I am told, right?
Yes.
But he had this very, very favored background in a certain sense to give him this overview of the English language and to serve this in a unique kind of way. He then brought all of this to you, and you were there when he came in, I guess.
That
Maybe
is
you could
right, and I tell
share
you,
this young genius coming in with this work with that glint in his eye.
with the glint in his eye, and that's something that I can never forget. I mean, he always had the twinkle in his eye, and he loved life. He was an enthusiast.
Yes.
And
Very bright, very
Oh,
bright.
yes.
Super bright, yeah.
and so that he loved to talk about words. He loved to talk about just almost any subject.
Yeah.
And this is certainly evident in the word menu. But I think that probably the one time that the glint was never stronger
Yeah.
was when he brought in the manuscript, and it was about 2.5 feet high. Yeah. And he insisted on bringing it in and putting it on my desk. That was up like this.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
there he was,
Yes.
holding this thing with his
Yes.
chin.
Yes, right,
Holding
right.
it on the top.
Right.
And he was looking over the top of it.
Yes.
I tell you,
Yeah.
it was wonderful.
Yeah,
And he
right.
just loved it. And we got a picture of him.
Yeah,
doing
good. Maybe
that.
we can sort of let
Yeah.
the people see that if we can
Yeah.
in post,
Yeah.
But and he was also, and again, it was just sort of so bittersweet in a sense because he put the last I and the last T dotted from his perspective
Yes.
on the software, on on it in April, I guess. No, it would have been July, I guess.
It was in July, just
July.
I mean, he hadn't taken a vacation for years.
Hadn't taken years and decades. He was working 15, 16-hour days on this thing.
And then he decided to go off on a vacation.
Well, first he finished the work.
That's right.
Got the last INT to his satisfaction and handed it over to all of you guys.
Before you go on a
editors,
vacation, Stephen, you get that manuscript in because we want to publish it.
And you knew he was going to do that.
Oh, of course we knew
And
he was
also,
going
I
to
think
do
it might be worthwhile, if I may, that he had this idea for some time, had suggested it to a number of people. He had suffered a great deal of rejection until finally Random House had the wisdom to pick him up on that.
Well, this is
and that's
true.
important, that he carried it by himself for a long time.
I think that, like many artists, he learned to live with rejection. And I think that publishing companies, when they look at a word book, well, they think that only trained lexicographers can put together word books. And I think that most people to whom Stephen brought his work couldn't believe that basically an amateur could put together something that could stand the test
he's a of
lexicography.
Right. Well, he's a comprehensivist to begin with, and they're suspect
absolutely.
by specialized
Yes.
people. And I'm not sure exactly what he said at one point that he thought himself that if he were a lexicographer, he probably could not have done it because he wouldn't have known all the rules he was breaking in the creative act of creating the system itself.
He's absolutely right.
Yeah.
That if he'd been a lexicographer, he would never have done it the way he did it. And
Might
of
not
course,
have done it at all.
that's the beauty of the book.
Right, yeah.
That he was able to do it and have various words and terms appear in different places.
Right.
And very logically in different sections of this book, and defined differently depending on how the word is being used.
That's right, and to have the vision to do it, and the comprehensive vision to do it, and
of course,
creativity is of that nature, isn't it?
Oh, indeed.
And the Academy is always saying you can't do it that way.
That is exactly.
Yeah.
But it's also true that nobody could pay a person to do the work that went into this.
No,
because
it was a
if
labor
you were
of
paying by the hour or paying by the minute, he never. There was no way that he would be able to get paid for it.
Yeah, we should say he had to have a great number of consultants that he worked with. Well, he had Don Goldstein in economics. He had other people in everything to get the terms right, because no one person could have all of those terms right.
Well, that's true, but that wasn't really what I was driving at.
All right.
What I was saying that he worked on this for so many years, all by himself, and it was only after that then he farmed it out to these hundreds of consultants in advertising and whatever the field.
Oh, the system was
but the system was already done, and the basic work was all done.
Yeah.
And it was a matter of fine-tuning it and refining it, so that we have now the final book. Indeed, is the work of many people, but the basic, what is here, basically is his work.
Yeah, right.
And
his vision, his idea, his baby. Yeah.
And no one lexicographer today could afford to spend a lifetime doing something like this.
That's right. And he's given us a system that can be as Roger in a certain sense, and as I think he's in very good company, although Roger's system is abstract and it's not as concrete, and this has many advantages over the Roger. Roger was a major step forward in terms of the civilization of the advance of civilization, just as this is.
Well, you're right, but I think Roger reflected the society of his day.
Yeah.
And so that it was in 1852.
That's right.
Absolutely up to date.
Yeah.
Whereas today, it's not regarded as up to date.
That's
it's 150 years old.
Yeah.
But it's remarkable that it lasted 150 years.
That's right. And or we were speaking earlier about Linnaeus, who set up the taxonomy. I think that was 17th century. I'm not sure, 18th century. But that has held up in terms of scientific, arranging of the animal systems and the taxonomy and so forth. They set up these systems. Well, Stephen has set up a grid here that could march could move on into the
This is true.
future and could be built upon and could be added to.
That
and could
is
be
a very, very
and
important
responsibly dealt with, right?
This is right. I think that you know, people have asked me, now that you have this, well, will it ever be updated? Because you know, with Stephen no longer being with us, that is this the book itself dynamic enough?
Yeah.
And it absolutely is.
Yeah.
It is not something that's frozen in stone.
Mm-hmm.
That it's the concept and everything can grow, and he's already laid out his grid so that we can update it and incorporate new terms and words and so forth, especially when you mention, for instance, computer technology and science and so forth.
Yeah.
It will have to happen, or even with dances and so forth.
I'm wondering, you know, if I wished that in a certain sense, obviously we wished we could speak with him, because he put that last, as we said, he put those, that he did that responsible act of finishing the work, went away, and then developed this awful brain tumor, died just about a year ago now, January 1992, right, before the book was to go to publication. It's wonderful that he was able to do that, and it's a great tribute to his spirit that he was able to finish the work.
Yes.
And he you know, he would be pleased to see that. But that studying of the Dewey Decimal, study of the other kinds of systems, and his grid and his perception of how to put this grid on the language and giving us a system to build on into the future, I think has a good opportunity to have given us something that we can utilize as a grid of pattern recognizing as we begin to move into the information age. It seems to me very well suited in a seminal kind of way to the development of this information age into which we're moving.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that the timing of this book could not be better. I mean, I think that there are many people, and people who are in computers, people who have no familiarity whatsoever with computers, likewise see this as a gold mine, a communication resource, something absolutely essential for today and for the future.
Well, as you have said, and as you could, I can't without my glasses read well, but can you read with your glasses? Or what does it say right there on the cover?
Yes, well...
The words, I think, are well taken.
Yes, it's a revolutionary new reference book that organizes language by subject matter, the way we in the 1990s understand it, use it, and remember it. And that's, in fact, that's exactly what it is.
Right.
It's a merging of dictionary, thesaurus, treasury of glossaries.
Yeah.
Certainly is that.
It is. There's a number of
reverse dictionary.
That's right.
You know, and then also almanac. And then it's
it has
all
almanac
of that
qualities,
is fully indexed.
Yeah, you have an index at the end so that you can get at a word.
So that you can, you have many different ways of going into the book. You can go into it through the table of contents, the abbreviated table of contents, and then, or the very detailed one which is there, or you can go into the index and just look up, for instance...
If you know the word.
Well, if you don't know the word...
Or you go to the area.
For instance, well, the other day,
yeah.
I was leaving for work, and I was asking my wife, I had broken the laces, one lace, on a pair of running shoes. And I was asking my wife to go down and get some new laces.
Yeah.
I said, I don't want these laces that look like tassels on the end. I want to be able to lace them up fast.
Yes.
And I was trying to think of, what do you call that thing on the end of the shoelace?
Darned if I know.
All right. Well, I use the Random House
thing
word
at the end of
menu.
the shoelace.
That thing at the end of the shoelace.
But more precise. And
that's right.
Yeah.
And so I looked just shoes.
Yeah.
I knew it was shoes.
Yeah.
All right. Shoes. Well, a subsection was accessories.
Yeah.
Shoe accessories. And fortunately, it was the very first entry there, aglet.
Aglet is what you call the thing that's on there that makes it so you
that tag on the end of the shoelace.
Uh-huh.
And so that I was...
So could you use that word with your wife?
Absolutely. Well, And so
it
that,
could be very impressive to be able to use a word like aglet. I'd be,
that's right. Well, can't you imagine
yes,
what
no,
this
no.
would be like before going out to dinner, for instance, a
Yes.
dinner party, and you're going to, say, the ballet.
Yes.
And you don't know much about ballet.
Mm.
So that you could get in here and you could look up ballet terms.
Yeah. Right.
Well, this is not a matter of showing off,
No.
but a matter of just being,
Well, it's a way of getting educated.
participating
Yeah.
and being a contributor, just instead of being a bump on a log.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I think in that way, the Random House word menu serves a wonderful purpose.
Yeah, and it's, as I said, it's not meant, and it has this beautiful, to me, poetic, he called it telegraphic style of definition of the terms that are included in there. It was never meant to be a, it was never meant to be a substitute for either the dictionary or the thesaurus, but I could see where any educated user of the English language, and the English language is increasingly much of the world, but any educated user of the English language would want to have a very, very good dictionary. Let's not necessarily say which, but a very good dictionary, a thesaurus,
Yes.
and next to it, the word menu. These would
Well,
be three
this is
essential,
true. Many
word, you know, reference
resources.
sources that would be essential to anybody who does writing of the English language.
Many people have said that this, and you raised that subject about whether this would be a substitute for a thesaurus, and people think maybe it would be. It's different from a thesaurus, where a thesaurus you find synonyms and antonyms.
Well, okay, there is also
which is quite different from this. You here.
That's true, but in
you will find all the vocabulary of a subject.
I understand. You're absolutely right. And you're absolutely right. And this is much more up to date and everything. But in all due respect to Mr. Roget, he did have an epistemology and an ontology and a grid that he put upon reality that came out of his mind that he gave us, and that's important. And it's that
indeed.
which is at core is what Stephen Glazier has given us in a modern context. It's
This is true.
That
This is true.
grid or that epistemology or ontology or understanding of the universe and the language is what's most important of all in a very real sense. Yeah. But the three would complement themselves, don't you think?
Oh, they complement one another very, very nicely. I mean, I think that sometimes exactly what you're looking for is a synonym.
Yeah, right. Okay, right.
You're not looking for all the words in a subject.
Mm-hmm.
But I must say that I find that more often than not, what I'm looking for is not a synonym and undiscriminated, because in, say, Roget's thesaurus or any other thesaurus for that matter, none of the words are defined. So that you have like a word, and then you have many other words that are supposed to be synonymous or like that word.
Yeah.
Well, the fact is that they're not.
Yeah, right.
I mean, they vary by degree.
Uh-huh.
Whereas you get into the Random House word menu and you find all the words in a field.
Mm-hmm.
And, for instance, on verbs of motion, that you would you might have go, and then you might, and say in a thesaurus, and you would have amble, barrel, hot-footed, whatever, run, barge. But here, what he does is define each one of those words.
He defines them. They're not just words.
Just a little telegraphic definition, so that you know the fine differentiations between the words.
Yeah, and that is important.
Well, isn't that what makes it?
That's what makes
the difference.
Practical. That makes it practical and meaningful in a very real tradition. I mean,
just
in a real
as like
sense.
when, for instance, you look up in domestic life and you look up different kinds of glassware. If you were just looking for synonyms for glass, you might find balloon glass and all different kinds of glasses.
Yeah.
But in the Random House word menu, you have a definition or a description for each one of those glasses.
Telegraphic.
That's right. That's
and
right.
very, very well written.
Exactly.
Very carefully written. It was very precise. It had a great precision to that. And he checked on that. And he had a number of people there at the Random House who helped to make sure
Oh,
that
indeed.
the precision was there. You had an army of copy editors
Oh,
and people
we
who
had
helped to
I
make
mean,
sure
and,
that it
you know,
had,
Saul
it met,
Steinmetz, who is the
Yeah.
executive editor, and a wonderful, wonderful
so this,
person.
it met Random
Oh.
House standards as well as Stephen Glazier's standards.
Absolutely,
But he brought you
absolutely.
good copy to begin with.
Oh, did
Yeah.
he ever? I
Right.
mean, just a delight. Just
Yeah.
a delight. I mean, it was something that we loved working on. Enid Pearson's another person who was an editor who worked on this and just marveled at some of the wonderful turns of phrase and the insights and the view of life and the humor.
Yeah.
Again, I keep coming back to the humor of
Yeah,
Stephen Glazier.
there is a humor and the touching on the theatrical too, which was there. But my partly he was.
Well, I think
involved
you're
with
right, the
He
theatrical.
had a very wide-ranging
Yes.
Catholic, eclectic
Yes.
view of the world. Yeah.
Yes.
And I was told from his parents and so forth that he kept lists from the time he was just a little infant. You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Anna.
Yeah. His wife.
His wife.
Lovely actress.
Wonderful. I mean,
talent.
and they're also certainly a demonstration of the fact that he loved the theater.
Yes,
and
right.
A beautiful, beautiful woman.
Yeah.
And a lovely person.
Yes, right. The theater and the arts, and his mother,
That's right.
a very fine artist, and had an appreciation of the sciences
Yes.
and of all
But
of
an
these
aesthetic
fields.
sense. I mean, you mentioned his mother and his wife, an aesthetic sense, which was more than just precision.
And he also had a sense of social conscience. He was very much
Oh.
a child of his time.
Yes.
He was very much a child of the 60s. He was
Yes.
a baby boomer. He was a leading person who gave this thing that, this system of understanding that I think increasing numbers of people are going to find very, very compatible as they begin to try and, you know, plow through, let's say, the complexities of the 90s and beyond as we begin to move ahead. It can take its place right there with the dictionary and the
It
thesaurus.
speaks our language.
It does, indeed, you know. It's the Random House word menu, Stephen Glazier. It's not, it's good, important that it be Random House. Roger is known as Roger. The word
Roger's
menu. You don't think
thesaurus.
this might be better called the Glazier's word menu? or
Glazier's
do you
word
think
menu,
maybe
well,
perhaps-
certainly that was, I'm sure, a
because
thought.
I don't know who published Roger, but Roger lives.
That's right. And I think that it's very, very important that people realize that this is an authored book.
Yeah,
Many, many people were consultants and contributed
yeah.
to this, but the author was Stephen Glazier.
The author was Stephen Glazier.
And,
He wasn't well known. He was he had written a novel, The Lost Province, and
That's
so
right.
forth. But that this was a labor of love of his for many
That's
years.
right.
And well, of course, obviously, you and I have an interest in making sure that the real credit for this major work
Yes.
goes to Stephen Glazier.
Oh,
Glazier is his
That's
name.
right.
So in a
That's
sense, it is the Stephen Glazier Random House word menu.
right. Oh, absolutely, no question about
Yeah,
it.
okay.
And but I think that it joins a very good family.
It sure enough does.
Of reference books.
And it couldn't come from a better place than Random House. And I'm sorry we're running out of time, but it's a pleasure. It's been a great pleasure talking with you.
My pleasure, a privilege to be here with a friend of Stephen's and to be able to talk about the Random House word menu.
Your pleasure to have had the perceptions of Jack Horner. Then he's associate publisher of the Random House. Stephen Glazier word menu is obviously recommended by us both very much for you to find it. You'll find it in the bookstores now and into the future as we move into this increasingly interesting, complex informational environment that Stephen has had such a hand in helping to put a meaningful grid upon. Happy to have been able to bring you those perceptions, Mr. Horner, once again. Jack, if I may.
Please.
Thank you very much for coming in. And we, on Conversation, invite you to tune in. We'll be coming back. That's it for now. Good night. We'll see you next week. Good night.